Charles, I'm trying something new based on YouTube analytics. Normally, I wait about 10 seconds to start talking to make sure everything is connecting up, but YouTube tells me people are switching off of the video, and everyone is dying to know how your cruise on Huntavirus Cruise Lines is going.
Oh man, I, I don't think I'm ever going to go on a cruise based on the news of this. I know every one of them is not going to be this bad, but why take the risk?
But you are
Also,
an
like,
international man of
man,
mystery in an undisclosed international location, not on a Huntavirus cruise. You're looking very well, Charles. How you doing?
thank you, thank you. No, I can disclose where I am. I was my design team entered our renovation project into this contest, the Asia Pacific Property Awards, and the big meeting was held last night, the award ceremony, and we, in fact, won an award, and I had to go up on stage and all this kind of stuff. And I'm here in Bangkok, where I'll be for a little while.
Congratulations on that big win. Do you have like a golden statuette that we can see?
The I don't have that, but it's called the Asia Pacific Property Awards, and we won in the interior design category. See, they may have something up. It's called the firm that does the work is Wolfgang Living in Malaysia, and we won for my apartment and the great work they did, but there were some mega people who won similar awards for different categories, for hotels, for buildings, for residential complexes. It was quite something to see all these design people and some pretty famous people.
It's a little bit like the Met Gala. You should have gone, dressed in a, saran wrap or whatever. The different people have all kinds of crazy outfits.
Well, I would spare the public that experience, but it was it is supposed to be a black tie event, and I didn't know that, so I did buy a new three-piece suit, but it's not a black tie. I don't even have a tie, so I'll just pretend I don't know, fashionista trying to
That's
make
all
a
right. I
statement.
think when you're important, Charles, people they don't mind or something like that. Now, but Charles, people are very interested, I think, to hear your opinion of what is going on. Trump says he's got a one-page memorandum. I mean, I don't know. That sounds like you're firing the maid or something, but he's got a one-page memorandum to end this conflict in Iran, or what do we know about what the latest
Well,
developments are?
yeah, Trump is saying that he's very close to ceasefire. On zero hedge, Iran is just realizing that their entire refinery system is about to melt down as in consequence of what we're doing here to blockade the country. The problem in Iran, many problems in Iran, after 47 years of living under a corrupt and incompetent theocracy, backed by brutal military guards and police and army. Um, the petrochemical complexes here have probably not been maintained. They've probably been protected through this recent bombing. And these are complex apparatuses. I mean, these first of all, you've got a lot of oil coming that you're pulling out of the earth and under the sea, and that oil has to go somewhere. And most of these complexes assume that the oil and gas will be exported. Well, it can't be exported, so it has to be stored or flared if it's gas, burned if it's oil. And you can't do much of that. And so the whole system, the equilibrium of the system is, I think, minutes, days away from imploding. So then you have the fact that they can't get hard currency, they can't probably pay their government officials, the military, etc. So Iran itself is under considerable set arrays of pressures. On the other hand, we have the strongest military fighting force on earth, and importantly, uh, Gulf nations like the UAE and I think Oman and others are saying enough of this bullshit from Qatar. They're siding with us. So what you're dealing with, I think, here are um, crazed negotiators on the other side who believe that they have some cards to play. And indeed, some of them, it is said that some of them embrace the idea of going out with a bang. You know, that they're not upset to lose and lose spectacularly. So if we were dealing with sane people, there would be a deal imminent. And probably the holdup is that when you try, we know what we want, the terms that we want, and then when you go to try to get the other side to evidence that they have agreed to it, they can't do it. Because their team has one or more obstinate people who are preparing to become martyrs. So that's my guess where we are right now. I think we won this military contest days/weeks ago. All the bluster that we saw, we've got these spectacular missiles we've been saving that we're going to use on you. We're going to sink all your aircraft carriers. None of that has happened.
It's interesting, Charles. You and I have had some conversations offline about how, there's been so many of the sort of traditional minded people who have been saying that obviously the mantra of Iran is that the United States has been embarrassed, and all of the MS now and Trump derangement people say that, Trump has lost this war and he's doing everything that Israel tells him to do. You were out front on this. You convinced me that this does seem to be part of a larger strategy having to do with energy and China and real big kind of geopolitical chess moves. And Trump is looking at this in a way that traditional politicians and military strategists, he basically said, hey, you know what, for the past 70, 80 years, you guys haven't been able to do it right. Sometimes that happens, right? Whether it's in business or technology, or here we see in politics, somebody takes a fresh look at something and does something that a lot of people, traditional-minded people, think is crazy. Kind of like when you were investigating GE, a lot of people said you were crazy. Turned out you were right.
A lot of people still say I'm crazy. And that's the nature of the beast. I think that when you come up with an idea that challenges the status quo, one of the reactions to the status quo is to indeed say, well, this is a loner. How do you actually know what you're talking about? Well, how does anybody who isn't in the room with Secretary Rubio, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Pete Hegseth, how do any of these people actually know what's going on? And the legacy press has beclowned itself operating on one volume frequency, which is, everything that Trump does is wrong and stupid. He doesn't know what he's doing. That is clearly not the case. He's won at least 2 elections, arguably 3, with no prior political qualifications of any kind. And he has, I think, improved the economy already. Talking narrowly, though, about the Middle East, I think what Trump and his team appreciated, and it's taken time for the Sunni kingdoms to appreciate, is that the theocratic regime in Iran will never compromise and is not interested in any kind of lasting peace. They have a very different worldview. Some would say that it is absolutely crazy, again, to embrace martyrdom. The Sunni clerics will tell you that some of the Shia tenets, the basic Shia tenets, are, boldly contradict the Quran. And, so there are people who criticize the theocratic regime of Iran on religious grounds. I criticize it on corruption. And I think if you take them away from the Middle East peace board, Middle East framework, and if it's possible for the Iranian people to send up a secular government that is not a militarily controlled government, a truly secular government that can rebuild the country, then I think the opportunities for actually forging a peace in the Middle East are very high. I think the UAE, the UAE is developed close ties now with Israel, and will benefit from that. And I think many other Sunni kingdoms and governments are going to look at this and say, you know what? The time has finally come. Let's actually have a truly lasting peace in the Middle East. Let's recognize Israel. Let's open the region up for foreign investment. Let's trade amongst ourselves. and let's really make this work. Um, should that happen, trillions of dollars will come into the region, trillions, and trillions will be recycled out of the oil revenue,
And
gas
Charles,
revenue.
wouldn't you agree that part of the reason the climate is ripe for that right now is that this generation of leaders in the Middle East perhaps sees a future where oil is not the resource that it
Right.
once was. China moving towards electric vehicles, maybe the next 50 to 100 years, the reliance on oil will go down, and these guys need to diversify all this money that they've made over the last 100 years.
They absolutely see that, particularly people like MBS in Saudi Arabia, who will eventually, absent chaos, will eventually run Saudi Arabia probably until he's 70 or 80 or even 90. So I think Trump sees and his people see that there is really an historic opportunity here in the Middle East, worth the gamble, worth what we've done. And we're very close to bringing it across the finish line into an agreement that could be enforced. Now, whenever I was in the deal making business, I often would say, forget these 50-page agreements. Give me reduce this deal to one page. What are we going to give up? What are we going to get? Gets analysis. On one page, what are the major points? And we know we can get lawyers from America and the equivalent in Iran to waste 1 million man hours devising 10,000-page supporting agreements. But what are the essential points we're going to agree on? And I think that's where Trump believes he is at this moment. He with some counterparty, believes that they have the essence of a deal. Now, lawyers can often fuck up deals. I've seen them fuck up deals personally. And that the real danger, and I said this in the very beginning, is establishing who your counterpart is. Right? I mean, who is the equivalent inside Iran? Forget Trump for a second, of Rubio. Right? Who speaks for the country? Who can commit the country? What we're seeing now is, the Revolutionary Guard characters, saying, well, the foreign minister doesn't speak for us, or representative of the foreign minister doesn't speak to us. We're not going to let the guy in the meeting. So we could be in a place where diplomats in Iran believe they can reach a deal, but where hardliners in the Revolutionary Guard understand that if a deal happens, they're either dead or fugitives or in prison. So, we may miscalculate, but I think the good news is we've had a lot of time to put forces in the region to feed them, to arm them, to have what we need. If we have to go to whatever the highest DEFCON level is to win this militarily decisively, and just be negotiating, on a battleship somewhere, the basis upon which the survivor surrenders, we may have to go that direction. But what I'm seeing is, in signs in the press and elsewhere, there's a zero hedge story about how there was a meeting in Russia that didn't go Iran's way. They expected, they walked in with bluster, citing treaties and potential support requirements from Russia. And Russia did not say, oh, yeah, troops are coming, bombs are coming, we'll threaten the U.S. There wasn't that. So, it could be that this is actually a two-front opportunity, that Russia sees a chance here by getting on the right side of Trump to have a decisive, true, resolution to the special military operation in Ukraine, and that they also manage somehow through all this to end up with an Iran that doesn't have a military hardliner group inside of it, which could someday turn against Russia. And I think Russia, it's not clear to me that Russia is 100% behind what has happened in Iran from 1979 onwards. They remember, I think, what happened when the United States and the West encouraged Osama bin Laden and his people to create mayhem in the Soviet Union. And they also watch, and we should watch, as people terrorists refinance, turned on us. So maybe people in the West and and in Russia are sick of this and want to turn this mess into a constructive way of operating. If you can reset these two battlefields in Ukraine and in Iran, um, it would, I think, be very good for Russia. Frankly, it's a borders Iran, shares a long set of borders with Iran. Having a stable Iran that attracts massive amounts of capital and indeed business. I mean, Russia has construction and engineering firms. They could get involved in building Iran. So my hope is that people will look through this and say, enough of these corrupt people that we've financed since 1979, who have fancy homes and Swiss bank accounts and assets outside Iran, while they pretend to be a theocratic regime. Enough of this.
Yeah. Well, then there's quite a lot going on, as always, here in the United States as well. You mentioned Marco Rubio. Somebody here points out that he's finding out he's got to be the new Senate pro tempore in Virginia because the FBI raided Louise Lucas's office and cannabis dispensary. Why does a Virginia state senator have a cannabis dispensary?
No doubt she has one or more nonprofits too. And what's with that hair?
It's, I don't know. The better to sell cannabis with, I guess. But she seems to be in trouble.
Good. This idea that you can have, because you get elected to some office or another, somehow that puts you above the law, that you can steal to your heart's content, that you can have your family get sweetheart deals, that you can put your family members on the campaign payrolls and pay them richly for providing services they can't actually perform. This has to be cleaned up. And good on the FBI for making progress.
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff they need to do too.
Yeah, and this idea as well that in various cities, including Dummies, New York City, that you can have a mayor or a governor or state level people running around and telling the federal government that ICE can't do its job inside your territory. That is something that was settled long ago legally. Good luck with that. People who are trying that as elected officials and regulators need to go straight to court, be indicted, and go straight to prison. You cannot do that.
I think they're relying on unconventional methods, staging protests and things like that, and just making it really difficult. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I think they have underhanded methods that they intend to employ.
No doubt. But the point is we have one federal government. We have around 4,000 counties in the United States of America. How many mayors do we have? How many, 50 states and all that? You can't have a system of chaos where nobody knows who's really in charge. And I believe, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe in a conflict between the federal and a lower government, the federal government prevails in key areas of constitutional authority. So these are people who doing this messing around, who can get funding from George Soros and that trader who lives in Canada and China now, who's financing Antifa, and from the Clinton Foundation and the Obama Foundation and other places. But this is not something that up with which we shall put. I think it's some book or another. You can't, as the President of the United States, allow this mayhem to continue much longer.
Yeah.
And there are a limited number of people who are emboldened in this. Eric Holder, Barack Obama, Singham, Soros, the Clintons, Norm Eisen, Andrew Weissman, the people who run these left-leaning networks as adjunct, really as funding arm, as propaganda arms of the democracy. There are a limited number of people you need to lean on, and this will stop.
I don't know why they haven't been doing anything to Norm Eisen. He continues to pop off anytime anything is announced. He talks about how he's going to bring lawsuits against it, and it just feels like nothing has been happening to this weasel of a man.
Yeah, or to Ben Wittes,
Right.
or to the censorship regime, and really, with we, Trump in theory is supposed to go to China now imminently, next in like 2 weeks or so, or a week. I would be saying to China, if I were negotiating this trip for Trump, be saying, listen, Trump is not going to get on a plane and leave the United States unless you round up Neville Singham and you round up Charles Lieber, and those
Yeah.
people need to be in the United States before Trump leaves. Otherwise, there's no meeting. And all this happy talk about how you're going to stop providing, lean on the people who provide the active ingredients for fentanyl, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. You haven't done sweet fucking all of that. I would lay down some very serious markers with them, because China's economic model, I think, is also heading, the wrong way. And the natural demand for the consumption. I don't believe that consumption is everything, but the demand inside China for sophisticated goods and services that we might provide as opposed to commodities isn't really there. People aren't having children. They haven't been having children for a long time. The population is aging. The rebuilding, the essential rebuilding, is largely done. Much of the investment that goes into their GDP is uneconomic investment, loss-making investment, and the Chinese command economy model doesn't work as people get more educated and interested in embracing the joys of freedom. It's just not going to work for them.
Speaking of China, Charles, I was reading recently that BYD is embroiled in several scandals. They built a big factory in Brazil, and then Brazil found out that they were basically like imprisoning people there to work there and build the cars. And also the cars, there was all kinds of scams going on in China where they were saying, this is the largest EV manufacturer, but basically the Chinese government was just buying the cars and parking them in the desert. Nobody ever actually even owned them.
Again, yes. I mean, you have to. I mean, when I started on GE, I felt strongly, and I feel even more strongly today, that if you're going to be out there every day having securities trading in your name, GE debt securities, equity securities, you've got to tell the marketplace the truth about your business. I mean, nobody expects you to predict precisely how much money you're going to make in the future, but you have to report in granular detail what you achieved in the recent past. You have to do that. When you stop doing that, that's never because you're hiding good news. It's because you're hiding very bad things. And so that's why I pounded the table on GE. And the same applies for national governments. If you're going to ask American taxpayers to send trillions of dollars into the treasury, into the various treasuries of our governments, and take money that people could use to live a better life for themselves. This is money they've earned. You're taking that money and you're wasting it. You're stealing it. You got to be honest about that. And the people who've been doing that, whether it's through foundations or just naked corruption, need to suffer. You need to make examples of people like Barack Obama. By the way, there's a story, I think, in the Post about, he and others are taking umbrage about the criticism of the Death Star building. And there's some story that he actually likes the design. It's he who liked this. And it's supposedly they're selling merch, which is also laughably gross. It's like, it's what happens when you put somebody up on a pedestal who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and you keep protecting him and giving him sweetheart deals and his family sweetheart deals and saying to him that he's a success when he was a disaster. You end up in this place with, a bunch of overpaid people,
bad podcasts,
ill-gotten gains,
Netflix shows
getting set on Juneteenth to pretend that this mess of the Obama presidential center is anything other than, one of the worst architectural projects ever commissioned, since the birth of Jesus Christ. I mean, it's disgusting.
Let me interject there, Charles, because we just have a few minutes before we go over. Actually, we're ready to go to the First Amendment Forum, but Obama was talking to Stephen Colbert about aliens. So I don't know if you had an opportunity. I haven't heard that. I'm sure it's interesting. I want to hear more about the chef, but people are going to be able to join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I also want to remind people that the Jason Goodman channel is back on YouTube. And if you haven't been watching on there, I recommend that you do. It's interesting. I'm learning a lot about the dynamics of YouTube and how it works or doesn't, because there are 115,000 subscribers on this channel, but after being dormant for 5 years, it's really almost as if I started a brand new channel. So like that channel, subscribe to that channel, share it around with your friends. And don't forget to join us in the First Amendment Forum. We will be right back in less than 5 minutes.